The rumble of distant thunder accompanied the squeak of swings on a nearly empty playground. 8-year-old Donovan slouched on a bench, trying to steady his ragged breathing. He wasn't supposed to be without his bodyguards, not even for a moment, but in a moment of childish rebellion, he'd slipped away from them at the park's entrance. He just wanted to feel normal, to taste a sliver of freedom. But as his gaze roamed the deserted sidewalks, two unfamiliar men crept from behind the trees. Their eyes flicked to Donovan's expensive sneakers, the neat collared shirt bearing a discreet but telling family crest. One man's mouth curled into a predatory grin. Donovan's heart lurched. His father always warned him about dangerous strangers. Now, face to face with them, Donovan realized too late that his naive craving for normalcy had placed him in real peril. "Hey, kid," one of the men called out, tone oily. "Need help finding your parents?" Donovan froze, every nerve on alert. The second man inched closer, reaching out as if to guide him. Instinct blared. "Run!" He sprang to his feet, heart drumming. The men lunged, blocking his path. They seized him by the arm. Donovan struggled, tears pricking his eyes. He wasn't just frightened, he felt ashamed for letting this happen. If only he'd listened to the guards, if only he'd stayed put. Suddenly, a voice pierced the tense air. "Leave him alone." A girl, no older than 10, stood some yards away, eyes blazing with righteous anger. She wore a simple t-shirt and faded shorts, her hair in two messy pigtails. Donovan had never seen her before, but hope flickered in his chest at the sight of anyone willing to help. The kidnappers hesitated, thrown off by the girl's surprising boldness. Donovan used their momentary distraction to thrash free. But one man's grip remained tight. "Back off, kid," the second man hissed at the girl. "No business of yours." The girl drew a shaky breath. Fear danced in her eyes, but she refused to back down. She raised her voice again. "He's my friend. You can't take him." She scooped a rock from the dusty ground, brandishing it as if it were a weapon. Donovan found a surge of adrenaline. The man holding him tightened his grip, but the other man turned to shoo the girl away, exactly the opening Donovan needed. He yanked hard, twisting until he slipped from the man's hold. He stumbled, nearly falling, but forced himself upright. "Run!" the girl shouted. Without a second thought, Donovan sprinted toward the park's exit, the girl picking up pace beside him. Behind them, the men cursed, uncertain whether to chase after two kids or bail. At that moment, Donovan's security detail, alerted by the frantic calls of a bystander, burst onto the scene from the parking lot. Chaos exploded. A bystander grabbed one kidnapper, the other fled. Donovan collapsed to his knees on the sidewalk, breathing in ragged gasps. He turned to see the girl, also panting, standing a few feet away. Her eyes brimmed with relief. Their gazes locked, a silent exchange of gratitude, of relief so profound it bordered on wonder. He opened his mouth to speak, but the bodyguards barreled up, frantic with apologies, whisking him away. "You're safe now, Master Donovan," one guard murmured. "We need to get you home." As they hurried him into a waiting vehicle, Donovan craned his neck, looking for that brave girl. She stood near the swings, hugging herself with trembling arms. Their eyes met once more, just for a second. He lifted his hand in a faint wave, desperate to thank her, to know her name. But in a blink, the car door slammed shut. She vanished behind tinted glass. Present day. Donovan jerked awake, heart pounding. The echo of that day's panic still clung to him. Decades later, the memory haunted him. The kidnapping attempt, the tiny, fearless girl who'd risked herself for a stranger. Rubbing his temples, he flicked on a bedside lamp, revealing the modern lines and opulent furnishings of his penthouse bedroom. The clock read 3:41 a.m. Another sleepless night. At 30 years old, he was a powerful CEO, Donovan Harrington, head of Harrington Holdings. Countless articles labeled him a financial genius, his face gracing business magazines. Yet behind the polished veneer, an ache gnawed at him. He'd never forgotten that childhood savior. She had likely vanished into the swirl of the city, unaware she'd rescued a wealthy heir that day. "I should have tried harder to find her," he muttered, raking a hand through his hair. For years, he'd had investigators quietly searching for leads, but there'd been too little to go on. He never even knew her name. Now, exhaustion weighed heavier than ever. His father's ultimatum hung over him: marry soon or lose controlling shares of the company. The board agreed that Donovan's constant single status weakened the firm's image. If he didn't produce a suitable fiancée, his father would invoke a clause that effectively ended Donovan's leadership. But how to forge a marriage with someone he didn't trust? He couldn't stomach the idea of a purely strategic union, not when he yearned for a real bond. A flicker of that childhood memory tugged at him again. Her. The only one who'd ever saved him. If only he could find her. Donovan forced himself to lie back, though sleep wouldn't come. By morning, he'd be back in suits and boardrooms, but a part of him insisted on continuing the search for that girl. He'd do it quietly, so the press or gold diggers wouldn't sabotage it. Maybe it was naive, chasing a ghost from the past, but it was the only genuine lead his heart knew. A brittle wind rattled the thin window pane of Charlotte's cramped apartment. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, scanning the living area that doubled as her makeshift art studio. Half-finished paintings leaned against the walls, some depicting cityscapes, others capturing fleeting glimpses of childhood memories she could never fully recall. Not that it mattered much these days. She had little time for art. Survival took precedence. She dressed in layers to combat the lingering chill. No fancy wardrobe, just a faded hoodie over a threadbare blouse and jeans. Passing her tiny kitchenette, she noted the near-empty fridge, another reminder that her funds were nearly depleted. For breakfast, she settled for tea and a leftover bread roll. No frills, but enough to keep her going. In a corner, her mother's medication schedule sat scribbled on a piece of paper. The sight sent a pang through Charlotte's chest. The bills for these prescriptions far exceeded her meager earnings. She clenched her jaw, recalling how just 2 years ago, her mother ran a modest but bustling shop, a little grocery and curios corner that anchored their neighborhood. Then the medical diagnosis came. Treatment costs spiraled. Loans were taken out, loans that quickly turned predatory. Charlotte's father had died long ago in an accident, leaving mother and daughter to fend for themselves. Her mother's illness set them on a downward spiral of debt. Charlotte had tried waitressing, tutoring, even selling some of her paintings, but the returns barely scratched the surface. Now the loan sharks circled like vultures, demanding payments with ruthless interest. Though her mother's store was still open, it was a shadow of its former self. Shelves half empty, and foot traffic waning. Charlotte couldn't possibly keep it afloat alone, especially when her mother was too weak to stand behind the counter for long. She'd considered selling it, but her mother adamantly refused, calling it their last piece of stability. Without the shop, where would they go? That morning, Charlotte donned a warm scarf and slipped out of the apartment, taking a short bus ride to the store. A cold drizzle slicked the sidewalks, matching the heaviness in her heart. She tried to remind herself she was strong, resourceful. She wouldn't let her mother's legacy die. "Morning, Mom," she greeted softly, pushing open the shop's creaky door. Her mother, a frail woman in a worn cardigan, sat behind the register, flipping through medical papers, eyes shadowed with worry. "Charlotte, you're here early." Her mother managed a wan smile. "I was just going over." She trailed off, gesturing to the heap of overdue bills, each with a red "Final Notice" stamp. Charlotte swallowed. "Let me see if any customers drop by. You rest, okay?" In truth, she knew the shop's revenue wouldn't cover these bills. They needed a miracle, or a dreadful choice, to borrow more from questionable lenders. Between idle moments, Charlotte's mind drifted back to a certain memory from her childhood. She hardly recalled details, only that she was around 10, at a park, and something terrifying was happening to a boy not much younger than her. She had stepped in, brandishing a rock, screaming at the men who tried to drag him away. In the swirl of adult chaos, she remembered urging the boy to run, feeling an odd sense of bravery and fear mixing. It ended with uniformed men, maybe security or police, pushing her aside. And then the boy was gone, whisked into a fancy car. She never learned his name. She shook her head, letting out a soft sigh. Why dwell on that? She had more pressing concerns. And yet, that fleeting memory always made her wonder who he'd grown up to be. A pang of regret nudged her. Maybe, if fate had been kinder, they could have become friends. She pictured him as a grown man, living an entirely different life, probably far away from debt and crumbling shops, no doubt. Mid-morning, just a few customers trickled in. Charlotte forced a smile, assisting them as politely as possible. Her mother tried to help, but soon retreated to the back room, coughing. The quiet hum of the store gave Charlotte a chance to reflect on her meager funds, mentally calculating if she could scrape together rent plus her mother's medication refill. Suddenly, the door banged open. In walked two loan sharks from the local syndicate, Davies and Hank, their expressions hardened. Charlotte stiffened, stepping around the counter to meet them. "We're here for the next payment," Davies snarled. "You're 3 days late. Where's our money?" Her heart hammered. I just need a little more time. We had fewer customers this month." "Not our problem," Hank interrupted, scanning the shop's sparse shelves. "If you can't pay, maybe you'd rather cough up the deed to this place?" She bristled. "You know I can't do that. It's my mother's livelihood. Please, just a bit longer." A cruel smirk twisted Davies's mouth. "We're tired of waiting. You got any valuables at home? Or maybe you prefer we take it out of your hide?" He knocked over a rack of canned goods to punctuate his threat. The cans clattered, rolling across the worn linoleum. Charlotte's mother peered out from the back, face pale. Charlotte lifted her arms in a placating gesture, desperate to keep them from terrorizing her mother. A rush of air signaled someone else entering the shop. Charlotte didn't even glance up, too focused on the men, but Davies and Hank turned. A tall man with an air of quiet authority stood at the threshold, Donovan. His hair was neatly styled, his posture poised. She recognized him vaguely from news or rumors, the billionaire rumored to own half the city. What is he doing here? She thought, perplexed. Before the loan sharks could question him, Donovan stepped forward with a cold gleam in his eyes. "What's going on here?" he asked, voice cutting through the tension. Davies sneered. "None of your business, moneybags. Unless you want to pay her debts?" Charlotte's cheeks burned with shame. She opened her mouth to protest. This was humiliating, facing intimidation in front of a rich stranger. Yet Donovan unexpectedly flicked a glance at her, then back at the men. "I'm her fiancé," he said, voice unflinching. "And yes, I do plan to settle any outstanding issues, but not if you break more of her property." A hush fell. Charlotte's eyes widened. Fiancé? They had never met, beyond a fleeting glimpse or two. Why was he claiming this? Davies snorted skeptically. "Fiancé, huh? Let's see some proof. Where's the ring, big shot?" Donovan merely nodded, pulling out his phone. "Should I have my security detail come in now?" he asked softly, almost bored. That quiet threat rattled the loan sharks. They shared a look, deciding it wasn't worth tangling with a known billionaire's resources. "Fine, we'll be back in a week." Davies scowled, stepping around the scattered cans. "You'd better have the money by then." They left in a swirl of hostility. Charlotte finally breathed out, nerves still raw. She turned to Donovan, trembling with a mix of gratitude and confusion. You didn't have to do that, but thank you." He gave a small nod, expression gentle. "I couldn't watch them bully you." Then, searching her face, he asked quietly, "Are you all right?" She swallowed, tears threatening. "No, but I'll manage. I always do." Little did she know, Donovan recognized that same determined spirit from a memory shrouded in time, the girl who once risked herself to save him. At last, he'd found her, though she had no idea he'd spent years looking for her. In prosody rate. A hush followed the thud of the grocery store door as the loan sharks stormed out. For several heartbeats, Charlotte stood rooted to the spot, her mind whirling with shock. Her mother, trembling, emerged from the back room with unsteady steps. The messy piles of scattered goods marked the violence that had just happened, the destructive aftermath of unpaid debts. And in the midst of it all stood Donovan, looking startlingly composed for a man who just intervened in a near-crime scene and declared himself her fiancé. The older woman's eyes flicked from Charlotte to Donovan, confusion etched across her wan cheeks. "Charlotte, dear, who is this man? Are you all right?" Her voice quavered, revealing both the strain of her illness and the horror at the scene. Charlotte's heart clenched. What should she say? That a powerful billionaire, recognized citywide, had unexpectedly claimed to be her fiancé? She glanced at Donovan. He gave a small nod as if to say, "Trust me." She cleared her throat, forcing calm into her voice. "Mom, this is Donovan. He helped with the loan sharks. They were going to smash more of the store." She exhaled slowly. "Let's finish up and close for the day, okay?" Her mother, pale but relieved, offered Donovan a grateful smile. "Thank you, sir. I don't know how you managed to scare those men off, but we owe you." Donovan dipped his head. "I'm just glad nobody got hurt. Please, don't worry about owing me anything." His eyes lingered on Charlotte, a mixture of concern and something deeper shining there. She squirmed under his gaze, unsettled by how safe she felt with him despite the bizarre circumstances. In the next 20 minutes, they tidied the shop. Donovan helped pick up falling cans and upright shelves. Charlotte's mother tried assisting, but soon had to sit, wheezing from the exertion. Charlotte chewed her lip, her mother's labored breathing reminding her of the medical bills piling up. When the shop was in a semblance of order, Charlotte flicked the sign to "closed." Then she turned to Donovan, crossing her arms. "You can't just claim to be my fiancé out of nowhere," she said, forcing a firmness to her tone. "I appreciate your help, but why?" He met her gaze evenly. "I saw the danger you were in," he said. "I had security nearby, I always do, and I used what influence I have to chase them off. The quickest way to show them you weren't alone was to pretend to be your fiancé." She frowned. "But you're a billionaire. The entire city knows your name. Why are you even here?" A faint smile tugged his lips, though his eyes revealed seriousness. "Because I wanted to see this store. I wanted to look into something personal." He hesitated, uncertain how much truth to spill. "That doesn't matter. What matters is you're in trouble. The loan sharks aren't gone for good. They'll come back, probably with worse threats." Her expression tightened. "I know, but I can't fix everything at once." She glanced toward the back room, where her mother dozed in a chair, fighting exhaustion. "I'm all my mother has. I can't let them keep terrorizing her." Donovan's voice turned gentle. "You shouldn't have to face them alone. Let me help." She bristled. "And why would you? Because you're a billionaire with a savior complex? Sorry, I can't repay you. We can't even afford rent next month." His chest constricted at her pride and desperation. "I'm not looking for repayment in the normal sense," he said quietly. "But yes, I can clear your debts, ensure your mother gets medical care, stop the sharks from returning, all of it." She froze, shock warring with suspicion. "Are you serious? You'd do that for a stranger?" He swallowed. "Not a stranger, not to me," he thought, recalling how she'd once saved him. But he couldn't say that yet. Instead, he offered, "I don't believe we're strangers anymore. And yes, I can fix it, on one condition." The shop's overhead lights buzzed faintly as Charlotte waited for his next words. Donovan exhaled, gathering his courage. "My father has threatened to strip me of my company if I'm not married soon. He wants me settled, for corporate stability, or so he claims. I was resisting the idea of a forced match, but now I see an opportunity. You need financial rescue. I need a legitimate wife to secure my position." Charlotte's jaw dropped. "You want me to marry you?" He raised a hand, anticipating her shock. "In name only at first. A contract marriage. I pay your debts, cover your mother's bills, ensure she can keep her shop. In return, you be my wife on paper, publicly. No one can know it's just a contract, not even your mother. My father's no fool. If he suspects a sham, he'll nullify my leadership. We'd share a home, appear in public as a couple." He paused, voice softening. "I promise not to demand anything physical unless you want it." Her cheeks flamed. "This is insane," she whispered. "You're basically asking me to sell myself." A flicker of pain crossed his face. "I'm sorry. I know it sounds cold, but it's the only way I can see to help you immediately and solve my problem too." He spread his palms. "If there were another way, I'd offer it. But you saw the loan sharks. They'll keep returning. If your mother's bills go unpaid, her health deteriorates, and my father might tear away the company I've built." Anger and humiliation battled in Charlotte's chest. She was no gold digger. She never wanted to rely on a rich man. But the memory of her mother's labored breathing, the knowledge that her mother needed urgent treatments, she clenched her fists. "I can't. This is too big, too crazy." Donovan nodded gravely. "I understand. I won't force you, but think it over. Time is short for both of us." For the next hour, Charlotte paced the store in anguished silence. Donovan quietly left her to her thoughts, choosing to wait in the corner, scrolling through his phone to manage urgent business tasks. Her mother dozed fitfully, oblivious to the monumental conversations swirling. Finally, Charlotte approached him again. If I said yes, I have conditions, no intimacy. We have separate rooms. I continue to care for my mother daily, and I need a job. I can't just be a trophy wife. A spark of hope lit his eyes. Of course, you can have a job at my company, any position you want. He paused. But you'll have to live with me if people are to believe the marriage is real. She bit her lip. I guess that's logical. A swirl of guilt and relief churned in her stomach. She hated the idea of lying to her mother, pretending this marriage was genuine. But if she refused, how could she save the shop or pay hospital bills? In a small side office near the back of the store, Donovan produced a simple draft agreement from his phone. He'd asked his legal team to stand by for quick documents, anticipating something like this. Charlotte skimmed it, her head throbbing with the weight of betrayal to her principles. But she remembered how quickly the loan sharks would return, how her mother's next medical appointment loomed. Heart hammering, she signed. Donovan countersigned, their eyes locked in a moment of surreal finality. I'll arrange a private legal wedding quickly, he said, voice hushed. No fanfare, but it'll be binding. I'll deposit funds for your mother's bills immediately. And no one can know it's not real. Understood? She swallowed. Yes, she whispered. Shame threatened to consume her, but there was also a flicker of gratitude for this Tim Foley's bizarre lifeline. He gently touched her shoulder, his gaze warm with sincerity. I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you. This arrangement is temporary until I secure my position. After that, we can revisit it. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. In the recesses of her mind, she felt an odd sense of recognition in his kindness, as if she'd seen that protective glint before. But the years had buried memories under layers of hardship. For now, she chalked it up to illusions. Who was this man truly? Donovan stepped outside for a moment to call his father's personal lawyer, ensuring the marriage license would be ready soon, that an officiant could handle the legalities quietly. He also summoned his personal security to discreetly watch the shop, guaranteeing the loan sharks wouldn't attempt a second raid. Alone in the store, Charlotte slumped against the counter, the contract folded in her pocket. She told herself it was just a transaction. She needed the money, he needed a wife. Yet her heart pounded with every glance at him, even from a distance. He was certainly handsome, exuding a confidence that set her pulse racing. But she refused to let emotion cloud her logic. This wasn't a fairy tale. After a brief huddle, Donovan returned, giving Charlotte a respectful distance. I have to handle some details. Should we meet tomorrow to finalize the wedding? I'll coordinate a small ceremony at a local clerk's office. We'll keep your mother convinced it's a sudden romance. She let out a shaky breath. Fine, she muttered, rubbing her temples. She'll be so happy to see me married. I guess that's a silver lining. A pang of guilt coiled in her stomach, lying to her mother, but she pushed it down. He offered a soft nod, turning to exit. At the threshold, he looked back, capturing her gaze. Thank you, Charlotte, he said, voice low. I know this isn't easy, but I promise I'll never hurt you. She swallowed, unable to respond, her heart oddly fluttering at his quiet earnestness. He left, the jingle of the shop's door echoing in the silence. For several minutes, she stood there, mind reeling. Tomorrow, she'd marry a billionaire with whom she'd barely spoken. For now, she only hoped this marriage could solve her immediate nightmares, and that she wouldn't lose herself in the process. The next day dawned with a sense of unreality for Charlotte. She awoke before her alarm, heart pounding with the weight of what she'd agreed to. She hurriedly prepared her mother's breakfast, trying to keep her composure light, though inside her mind swirled. She had no idea how to explain that she was suddenly marrying someone so wealthy without raising suspicion. But Donovan's terms were uncompromising. She wasn't allowed to tell a soul that this union was for show. That meant her mother, still weak in bed, remained blissfully unaware of the contract aspect. If there was a silver lining, it was that her mother's happiness at the news might help boost her spirits. That morning, after checking her mother's medications and ensuring a neighbor would keep watch on the shop for a few hours, Charlotte stepped outside to find Donovan waiting in his sleek car. He stood beside it in a dark suit, tie neatly knotted, a bouquet of white flowers in hand. The crisp morning air felt heavier than usual, loaded with unspoken tension. She approached slowly, eyes flicking between his impeccable attire and the arranged bouquet. He offered a small smile, nervous, surprisingly gentle. "You look nice," she managed, forcing a calm tone. She wore a simple ivory dress that ended just above her knees, modest and practical. It was the best she could do on short notice, certainly not the elaborate bridal gowns other billionaires' brides might don. "You do too," he answered, voice unusually soft. "Are you ready?" She swallowed, giving a single nod. "Ready as I'll ever be." They drove quietly to the local clerk's office downtown, a discreet venue Donovan's legal team had arranged the previous night. Sitting in the passenger seat, Charlotte's mind played out every possibility. Was this the biggest mistake of her life, or a necessary lifeline? Donovan's calm presence offered little insight. His face looked composed, but she sensed underlying tension in the set of his jaw. The clerk's office was nearly empty that morning. A friendly official escorted them into a small room with a short aisle and a few chairs, far from the lavish wedding halls of socialite ceremonies. There, a justice of the peace greeted them, glancing at them with polite curiosity. Donovan's assistant lingered by the door, the only other witness, discreet yet attentive. He wore the practiced neutrality of someone used to handling Donovan's private affairs without question. Charlotte's heart hammered as they stood side by side. The justice of the peace read the required legal statements, then asked if they wished to exchange vows. Her cheeks burned. They had no real vows. This was a contract. Yet Donovan slid a ring onto her finger with surprising tenderness, an unspoken apology in his eyes. She accepted it in stiff silence, managing a quiet, "I do." The official declared them man and wife. That phrase echoed in Charlotte's mind, both surreal and final. When it ended, Donovan gently squeezed her hand as if to say thank you. She couldn't muster more than a faint nod. By the time they left, signed papers in hand, Charlotte's emotions felt tangled beyond measure. Uneasy relief that her debts would soon be lifted, shame at lying to her mother, and a tiny flicker of gratitude that Donovan wasn't acting callous about the arrangement. If anything, he seemed equally conflicted, a swirl of guilt in his gaze. He suggested they get coffee before heading back to her place to break the news to her mother. They found a small cafe tucked away on a side street. Inside, an older woman served them steaming mugs, barely sparing them a glance. The two newlyweds took a table near the window, a hush settling over them. Charlotte traced the rim of her cup, avoiding his eyes. "I still can't believe we just did that," she murmured. "You're my husband on paper." Donovan cleared his throat. "I know this is a lot, but it's for the best, I promise." He paused, as if summoning courage. "I'll transfer the funds to settle your mother's medical bills right away, and I'll see to it that those loan sharks never bother you again." She took a shaky sip, the warmth steadying her. "Thank you, really. But it all feels hollow, lying to everyone, especially my mother." Her voice cracked. "She'll be so happy, and I have to pretend it's real." His expression softened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, reaching across the table. He hesitated before gently resting his hand on hers. "I wish I could spare you that, but if my father suspects a fake marriage, he'll cut me out of the company, and if word spreads about you not being my real wife, I won't be able to protect you." He exhaled. "We're in this together now." She pulled her hand back, not unkindly, but with caution. They downed the rest of their coffee in relative silence, a shared tension lingering in the air. The next stop was her mother's apartment, or rather, their mother's shop, since that was where her mother spent most waking hours. Charlotte texted her mother that she had something important to announce. The reply came swiftly, curiosity laced in every word. Driving over, Charlotte stared out the window, mind drifting to the day Donovan had confronted the loan sharks. The memory of how confidently he'd handled them, how swiftly he'd claimed her as his fiancée, struck her anew. She realized he was used to commanding situations, a hallmark of a billionaire at the top of his game. But behind that steel exterior, she sensed real empathy. If the arrangement was purely business, would he have cared so much about her mother's bills or the risk from the thugs? She couldn't be sure. At the shop, her mother brightened when they walked in, seeing Charlotte in that simple white dress. Donovan greeted her mother warmly, offering a small bouquet of daisies he'd picked up along the way. The older woman's eyes glistened with happy confusion. Charlotte swallowed her guilt, weaving the story they'd rehearsed, that she and Donovan had known each other for weeks, and amid her financial troubles, they realized they'd fallen for each other. It was sudden, yes, but they'd married that very morning. Her mother's voice shook with emotion, clasping Charlotte's hands. "You found yourself a good man?" She turned to Donovan. "I'm so glad you'll keep my daughter safe. I can rest easier now." Donovan, playing his part flawlessly, inclined his head in respect. "I promise to do everything in my power to look after her. And you," he added softly, "you won't have to worry about bills anymore." Charlotte's heart twisted at the joy on her mother's face. No mention was made of the contract's existence. She didn't dare betray Donovan's trust, not while her mother beamed with relief. Half the reason she'd agreed to this in the first place was so her mother wouldn't carry the weight of their debts, a gift laced with painful deceit. They spent the remainder of the afternoon chatting with her mother, Donovan asking polite questions about the shop's history and how her father used to run it decades before. Charlotte caught glimpses of Donovan's refined manners, how he listened intently, how he gently steered the conversation if the mother grew too tired. He was a chameleon of sorts. One moment a dominating billionaire, the next a cordial man who actually enjoyed small talk about her father's old recipe for spiced cookies. When evening rolled around, Donovan suggested they return to his home. No, their home for the time being. Charlotte's mother practically shooed them away, insisting they celebrate their wedding night, telling Charlotte to go make a wonderful life, dear. Her mother's exuberant smile knifed Charlotte with guilt, but she forced a smile, accepting the hug and well wishes. In the car, Donovan kept glancing at her as he drove. She stared straight ahead, ignoring the flutter in her stomach. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "I guess we should talk about living arrangements. My place is plenty big. You can have your own room as we agreed." She nodded. "Yes, that's for the best." His lips twisted into a faint, apologetic smile. "We might need to appear a little affectionate in public settings, like dinners, gatherings. My father's no fool. If he suspects we're estranged, he'll revoke my authority." Charlotte pressed her lips together. "Right, I understand." The notion of feigning affection in front of others struck her as daunting, though some small part of her heart wondered if it'd truly be all pretend. Soon they arrived at Donovan's residence, a sprawling estate with neatly manicured grounds, discreet security cameras, and a tasteful modern facade. Certainly more impressive than the cramped apartment she'd known all her life. The staff, well-trained, greeted them with polite smiles, though they shot curious glances at Charlotte. Donovan introduced her as Mrs. Harrington in a composed tone that made her cheeks warm. Moments later, they were alone in a large living room. She dropped onto a plush sofa, exhaling. Her body felt drained. Donovan gently set her small suitcase down. "I'll have someone put your things in the guest bedroom," he offered. She nodded, hugging her arms. "Thanks." Then, after a silence, she gazed up. "Are you all right with this?" His eyes flickered with mixed emotions. "I've faced tough mergers, boardroom showdowns, but this is different. I want you to know I'll respect your boundaries and your conditions. I'm not out to claim some twisted right because of our contract." She found unexpected relief in that reassurance. "All right, just let's keep everything as normal as possible, okay?" He hesitated, then forced a faint smile. "We'll manage. And Charlotte, welcome home." The last words emerged with a warmth that tugged at her heart. A hush settled. She realized that whatever lie they now lived, it provided the security her mother needed and the illusion Donovan needed. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. "I'll go get settled," she said, voice subdued. "Tomorrow you can show me what you want me to do at your company, so it doesn't look like I'm freeloading." He nodded, expression thoughtful. "Sure, I'll have my assistant handle your onboarding. Any role you want, admin, entry level, we'll figure it out." She offered a nod of thanks, then disappeared down the hall, uncertain whether to laugh or cry at the day's events. In a single sunlit morning, she'd become a billionaire's wife, albeit in name only, and for reasons that scarcely felt real. Yet her mother was safe for now, and her future no longer overshadowed by debt collectors. She resolved to guard her heart, reminding herself it was merely a contract. Little did she suspect that the lines between pretense and genuine devotion would soon blur in ways neither she nor Donovan could anticipate. The morning light filtered through the wide windows of Donovan's mansion, and Charlotte stirred under the unfamiliar weight of luxury bedding. She blinked at the high ceiling, half expecting to wake in her cramped apartment, but was instead reminded of last night's surreal turn. She was now legally his wife, a billionaire's spouse in name alone, and today she would begin working at his company. Anxious nerves churned in her stomach. She could picture the whispers. Who's that new girl? Why is she so close to the boss? She'd never felt more out of her depth. By the time she ventured downstairs, the house was quietly active with minimal staff, just a discreet housekeeper who offered a polite, "Good morning, Mrs. Harrington," and a chef preparing simple breakfast. She forced a courteous smile, still unused to being called Mrs. Harrington. Donovan stood by the kitchen island, dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks, phone in hand. His gaze lifted as she entered, and a trace of relief softened his features. "Morning," he said, setting aside his phone. "I wasn't sure what you like for breakfast, so the chef made a few options." She offered a small, appreciative nod. "Thank you. This is more than I'm used to." The chef laid out scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, and toast. She found the gesture extravagant yet oddly comforting. Donovan gestured for her to sit. "We have a bit of time before we leave for the office. Thought we might talk about your role." He hesitated. "You sure you want an entry-level position?" Charlotte sipped orange juice, bracing herself. "I'm sure. I don't want special treatment. If I'm working there, it's on my own merit." She looked him in the eye, her resolve clear. She might be forced into a contract marriage, but she refused to let him hand her a cushy job on a silver platter. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I spoke with HR. They'll treat you as a new administrative hire assigned to one of our departments. Officially, no one else besides my assistant knows about our arrangement, so it's important you just go in and do your best. People may figure out you have some connection to me, but hopefully not the full truth." She swallowed, a knot in her throat. "I'll handle it." A short while later, they arrived at Harrington Holdings in separate cars. Donovan insisted on it, wanting to maintain the illusion that she was just another employee. He told her to show up at the main entrance, meet with HR for orientation. Meanwhile, he'd enter through the executive garage. The building's sheer scale intimidated her, 40 floors of gleaming steel and glass. As she walked in, the busy lobby crackled with energy. Employees in tailored suits hurrying past, receptionists directing visitors, an enormous digital sign scrolling corporate updates. Her heart thudded as she approached the HR desk, introducing herself as Charlotte. The HR rep smiled blandly, scanning a roster. "Yes, you're assigned to administration on the 17th floor," the woman said. "Let me set you up with a temporary ID badge. You'll get your permanent badge by next week." Charlotte pinned the temp badge to her blouse, riding a crowded elevator up. A swirl of uneasy excitement flooded her. She was a married woman, Donovan's wife no less, yet here she was, about to be an administrative assistant in his own corporation incognito. "I must be crazy," she thought, "but it's the only way to salvage my mother's health bills and keep everything afloat." On the 17th floor, she was ushered into a bullpen-like area of desks. A supervisor introduced herself as Miss Lee, a strict-looking woman in her 40s. "Welcome to admin. You'll support a few different managers with filing, scheduling, data entry." "The usual junior tasks," Ms. Lee explained. Charlotte nodded, soaking it all in. At first, the morning went smoothly. She threw herself into assigned tasks, organizing digital documents, sorting a backlog of paperwork. The routine soothed her rattled nerves. She'd always been diligent, and it felt good to be productive. But around midday, a cluster of female employees started eyeing her. Charlotte recognized them from earlier glimpses. Impeccably dressed, all carrying themselves with a confidence that suggested they'd been here for years. During lunch break, they approached her. The ringleader, Lauren, leaned over her cubicle wall, a thin smile curving her lips. "You're Charlotte, right? New here?" Charlotte set down her pen. "Yes, that's me." Another woman smirked, flicking her gaze over Charlotte's relatively simple attire. "We saw you come in with Mr. Harrington a few days ago, the day of that meeting with the board. He was quite attentive to you in the lobby. Are you too close or something? Her heart jolted. So they'd noticed Donovan with her during an earlier courtesy visit. Of course, rumors might circulate if staff saw them together, but she willed her voice steady. Not particularly. I just happened to speak with him about a project, she lied, hoping to keep suspicion minimal. Lauren's eyes narrowed. He doesn't usually chat with new hires. Some kind of special connection? The mocking lilt set Charlotte on edge. Word of advice, sweetheart. Don't get any grand ideas. He's out of your league. A swirl of anger mixed with embarrassment. Charlotte forced an indifferent shrug. I'm here to do my job, that's all. The trio exchanged knowing smirks. One of them placed a tall stack of papers on Charlotte's desk. Be a dear and finish these by end of day. It's part of the departmental backlog. The tone sounded suspiciously like a forced dumping of tasks. Charlotte recognized an attempt at bullying. She sighed inwardly. She needed this job. Arguing would create drama, so she nodded, summoning calm. All right, I'll get to it. They sauntered off, whispering among themselves. Across the aisle, another junior staffer gave Charlotte an apologetic glance, as if to say they do this to every newcomer. She felt a pang of relief that at least one person noticed the unfairness. The rest of the afternoon, they piled more menial tasks on her. By 5 p.m., she was exhausted, her wrists aching from data entry. She grabbed her bag, heading toward the elevator. She had half a mind to contact Donovan's assistant, but no, that would be running to the boss for help. She wanted to solve this on her own. But outside the elevator, she spotted Donovan's male assistant, Jacob, heading her way, wearing a purposeful expression. Mrs. Haar? Charlotte? May I have a word? Her stomach flipped. Yes, she said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. Jacob led her aside. Mr. Harrington is aware some staff have been less than welcoming. He'd like you to come with me to his office. Her heart sank. So someone told him. She murmured a faint protest. I'm fine. I can handle it. Jacob shook his head politely. He insists. She followed him to the executive floor, an opulent space of glass partitions and hush-quiet corridors. At the end of the hall, Donovan's corner office loomed, tinted glass revealing a sprawling city view. She braced herself, stepping inside. Donovan stood by his desk, arms folded, tension etched in his jaw. Ms. Lee was there, along with Lauren and 2 other women from the group. Their faces paled at Charlotte's entrance. Immediately, Lauren began stammering apologies. Donovan silenced her with a glare. I've been informed you've been assigning disproportionate tasks to a new hire and making personal remarks. Care to explain? Lauren sputtered, eyes darting to Ms. Lee for support. Ms. Lee cleared her throat. We didn't realize we were overloading her. She never complained. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding. Donovan's voice cut like steel. I won't tolerate harassment in any form. He motioned to Jacob. Compile the evidence. Effective immediately. These individuals are dismissed. The stunned women gasped, launching into frantic justifications. Donovan didn't budge, expression resolute. Charlotte watched, heart pounding. She'd never seen him this stern. She recalled the loan shark's encounter, the same unwavering aura. Ms. Lee started to protest that maybe a warning would suffice, but Donovan shook his head. No, our corporate culture is built on respect. I won't have employees who bully a colleague. Gather your belongings. He jerked his gaze at the door. The women slunk out, faces ashen. Silence fell once they left. Charlotte stood rooted, overwhelmed by the swift justice. Donovan's gray eyes softened as he turned to her. I'm sorry this happened. I should have foreseen the office politics. Are you okay? She managed a nod, still reeling. Part of her felt gratitude that he'd protect her so fiercely. Another part worried about fueling rumors. I'm fine, thanks. She gestured helplessly. His assistant quietly excused himself. Donovan exhaled, motioning for Charlotte to sit. I can't risk letting you remain in a department that allows bullying. Join my personal staff. Be my personal secretary or something. We'll figure out a role that keeps an eye on you. She frowned, heart pounding. But that'll only stir more gossip. It'll look like I was singled out for special treatment. He softened, stepping closer. Charlotte, you're my wife. Even if no one else knows, I can't stand by while you're mistreated. His tone gentled. I promise, I'm not trying to overshadow your independence. Just trust me on this. His wife, the phrase still jarred her. But she remembered how those women had sneered, how swiftly he'd eradicated that problem. For once, it felt oddly comforting to have someone in her corner so decisively. She let out a shaky breath. "All right, I'll be your personal secretary, but I'd like to do real tasks, not just stand around." He nodded, relief flashing in his eyes. "Deal. We'll make it a real job. I need you close anyway. My father's visiting next week, and we have to keep the facade consistent." His voice dipped, a thread of something akin to regret. "I hate that it's come to this, but maybe it'll be simpler if you're near me." She swallowed the unexpected warmth blooming in her chest. The entire arrangement was still a sham, but her heart fluttered at the care he showed. She forced a cool nod, trying to subdue her emotions. "All right then," she murmured. "Let's go home." He escorted her to the elevator, staffers throughout the floor watching curiously. She clutched her bag, ignoring the stares. In the quiet ride down, their shoulders nearly brushed. She felt his steady presence, recalling how he'd fiercely defended her. It chipped away at her guard a bit more. She reminded herself, it's just an arrangement. Yet, as they walked out to the car, side by side, she couldn't deny the faint spark flickering between them, dangerously close to genuine feeling. The next morning, Charlotte woke earlier than usual. A faint sense of anticipation thrummed through her veins. Her first day acting as Donovan's personal secretary. It still felt surreal that she was living in a lavish home as a billionaire's wife, albeit in name only. The hush of the corridors seemed to remind her at every turn, this is not your world. Yet here she was, stepping into the role he'd insisted upon to keep her close, to keep her safe. She found Donovan in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone, a mug of black coffee in hand. He looked up and offered a small smile. She managed a return smile that felt more genuine than she expected, remembering how fiercely he'd defended her the previous day. They ate a quiet breakfast, exchanging few words, but a lot of glances. Each time her eyes met his, a flutter nagged at her chest, something neither fully dismissed. But she couldn't let her heart get carried away. It was all still a contract to solve both of their problems. He needed a spouse to satisfy his father's demands, and she needed salvation from crushing debt. Before they left for work, he paused as if deliberating something. Then he reached into a drawer, producing a sleek, understated smartphone. "Here," he said quietly, handing it to her. "It's yours. I can't have my personal secretary lacking a direct line to me. And I want you to be able to contact me if anything happens." She blinked, taken aback. Her own phone was old, half-broken. "I thank you," she murmured, fingers curling around the new device. The gesture felt oddly intimate, not just a simple piece of tech, but a line tethering them. For a fleeting second, she considered how caring he could be behind that composed exterior. They drove to the office in separate cars again. He wanted to maintain appearances that she was just another staff member. However, upon arrival, she took a private elevator to the executive floor, led by Donovan's assistant, Jacob. The hush in the corridor was thick with significance. She remembered the stares from the admin department. Stepping into Donovan's expansive corner office as his personal secretary brought a swirl of nerves. The room, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, provided a spectacular view of the city skyline. A large glass desk dominated the space, with a secondary workstation set up at a smaller desk in the corner for her. The environment was sleek, minimalist, much like Donovan's persona. He greeted her with a calm nod, eyes flicking over her outfit as if making sure she felt comfortable. "I've arranged a set of tasks for you, scheduling my meetings, filtering certain communications before they reach me, and helping me prepare for upcoming presentations. Think you can handle that?" She squared her shoulders. "I can handle it," she said, determined. All around, the hum of commerce echoed through the walls, phones ringing, subdued chatter. She settled at her new station, trying to ignore the small jolt in her chest whenever Donovan's gaze lingered on her. As the morning wore on, she discovered that juggling Donovan's schedule was no small feat. He had back-to-back board sessions, investor calls, philanthropic planning, yet she found satisfaction in the efficiency of it all. Her organizational skills were tested, and she rose to the challenge. Whenever Donovan stepped away from a meeting, he'd pause by her desk, quietly asking if she was coping. That quiet check-in warmed her, though she brushed it off with a polite, "I'm fine." Around midday, a catering service arrived with lunch for him, presumably standard for the CEO. Charlotte was prepared to slip out to the building cafeteria, no point mooching off his private meals. But he intercepted her. "Stay," he said gently, unfolding a second set of utensils. "We can discuss the next meeting while we eat." She hesitated, scanning the upscale spread. Grilled salmon, seasonal vegetables, artisanal bread. He probably didn't realize how extravagantly he ate compared to her usual cheap sandwiches. I don't want to impose," she mumbled. His brow furrowed slightly. "You're my secretary. We'll talk through the upcoming conference. And you're my wife as well. If we're supposed to look like a real couple, having lunch together isn't suspicious." She swallowed, nodding, and took the seat he gestured to. The meal was delicious, and for a few moments, they actually conversed about business strategy. She found his insights captivating. Behind the billionaire facade was a sharp mind that thrived on innovative thinking. He, in turn, seemed keen to hear her perspectives, occasionally asking her to weigh in on marketing angles or philanthropic expansions. They'd nearly finished when Jacob knocked softly. "Sir, your father's office called. He's requesting a meeting with you in 2 days to meet your wife, apparently. He says it's urgent." Donovan's posture tensed. "Understood. Book a slot on the calendar. We'll handle it." Jacob nodded and left, leaving an uneasy hush in the air. Charlotte set down her fork, heart quickening. "So, I guess I'm about to meet your father? The one who demanded you get married?" He leaned back, a shadow crossing his features. "Yes. He's not a bad man, exactly, but he's controlling when it comes to the company. He'll want to test you, see if we're truly a real couple." His jaw tightened. "We can't slip up. If he suspects a sham marriage, everything unravels." Her stomach lurched. "I'll do my best." He reached out, lightly covering her hand on the table. "I'm sorry to drag you into all this, but I promise, as soon as my father's satisfied, we'll reduce the charade, and you can keep your job and the financial help for your mother." She nodded, lips parted in a mix of relief and dread. Her free hand curled in her lap. She hated lies, especially to an old father who might just be worried about his son. Yet the alternative was losing everything. She forced a thin smile. "All right, let's do it." For the afternoon, the office bustled with typical corporate energy, but now employees eyed Charlotte with wary respect. Word must have spread about the abrupt firings. She felt no triumph, just a pang of self-consciousness each time someone offered a forced smile. Donovan noticed her discomfort, occasionally shooting her reassuring looks from across the room. Eventually, at day's end, he walked over. "We're heading home soon," he murmured quietly so onlookers wouldn't guess the depth of their connection. "Unless you have errands to run?" She shrugged. "Nothing pressing. I left some chores at my mother's shop for tomorrow, but she's fine for now." Back at the house that evening, she found herself strangely at ease walking around the expansive living room. Donovan disappeared briefly into his study, likely handling urgent calls. She wandered into the adjacent library, marveling at rows of leather-bound books and modern business titles. She trailed her fingertips along one shelf, remembering her own love of reading before debts consumed her every waking moment. "Feel free to read anything," came Donovan's voice from behind. She turned, finding him watching her with an unreadable expression. "I used to enjoy escaping into fiction before, well, the demands of the company took over." She offered a slight smile. "Maybe we can both find time for an escape now." The words slipped out before she realized how intimate it sounded. A flush crept into her cheeks. His eyes held a flicker of warmth. "Maybe," he echoed softly. Then his phone chimed. He glanced at it, sighing. "My father's texting me about that meeting. The timing is 2 days from now, 7 p.m. at his estate. You'll come with me?" She swallowed, nodding. "Yes, I'll be ready." They stood facing each other in the library's soft lamplight, an unspoken tension lingering. She realized that despite the formality of their contract, they were building a real bond, one formed through small, shared moments. He was no tyrant. If anything, he was kind, thoughtful. The friction lay in the pretense binding them. The hush stretched. She forced a light laugh, stepping back. "I should turn in. Early day tomorrow." "Of course," he said, his voice low. "Sleep well." She paused at the threshold, glancing over her shoulder. "Thanks for everything." A half smile hovered on her lips. Then she vanished into the hallway, leaving him alone in the warm glow. Once in her room, she sank onto the bed, head spinning with the day's events. The office bullying, his swift retribution, the father's looming test, the quiet dinner lunch they shared, all swirling with emotions she struggled to name. A small corner of her heart whispered that Donovan might be more than just a benevolent protector or cunning businessman. Perhaps he truly cared, in ways that extended beyond a mere contract. But she banished the thought, reminding herself that illusions could only lead to heartbreak. She changed into comfortable pajamas, turning out the light. The mansion's hush enveloped her. Drifting towards sleep, she thought of him in the study, possibly finalizing deals or reading financial reports. She hoped this marriage was worth the lies, for both of them. She hoped the swirling tension in her chest would settle before it burst into something she couldn't control. An almost uncanny stillness settled over Donovan's mansion in the moments before they left for his father's estate. Charlotte could sense the tension rolling off him in subtle waves. Every time she glimpsed his profile, she noted the set of his jaw, the way his hands curled into fists before he forced them to relax. Neither had spoken much that afternoon. Words felt superfluous when they both knew the stakes of this evening. At precisely 6, Donovan emerged from his study wearing a tailored suit in a deep charcoal hue, crisp and impeccable. A shimmering tie complemented his steel gray eyes. Charlotte, feeling underdressed in anything less than sophisticated, had borrowed a pale blue knee-length cocktail dress from a local boutique Donovan's assistant recommended. She fussed at the hem, nerves prickling her belly. The color brought out warmth in her complexion, or so the boutique owner said, but she worried about matching the refined environment of a billionaire patriarch's home. Donovan's gaze flicked over her, eyes softening. "You look stunning," he murmured, voice hushed. The raw sincerity made her heart flutter. She managed a small, tight smile. "Thank you." She swallowed, bracing herself. "I'll do my best to convince your father." He nodded, stepping forward. Gently, he adjusted a stray curl by her temple. The tender gesture made her pulse skip. "Let's go," he said, offering his arm. They rode together in a sleek black sedan. Donovan insisted on being the driver, wanting no spectators or staff overhearing them. The city lights melted away, replaced by winding roads that led toward the old money district. Tall iron gates soon rose into view, flanked by manicured hedges and a discreet security checkpoint. His father's estate sprawled beyond, illuminated by carefully placed lights that highlighted ancient oaks and pristine gardens. At the grand foyer, a butler greeted them with a polite bow. "Mr. Harrington awaits you in the drawing room." Donovan guided Charlotte inside, the marble floors echoing each click of her modest heels. She inhaled the faint scent of antique wood polish and distant piano notes. Luxurious indeed, but also cold, as if the house itself existed for display rather than homey comfort. In a large sitting area off the hallway, Donovan's father, Thomas Harrington, stood, whiskey glass in hand. He was tall, silver-haired, with an air of practiced authority. Two older men in suits hovered near him, presumably board associates or close advisors. They turned as Donovan and Charlotte approached. Thomas eyed them, gaze lingering on Charlotte with curiosity. "At last," he said, swirling his drink, "you've brought your bride. I was beginning to think you'd invented this marriage for show." The words, though lightly spoken, carried an undercurrent of suspicion. Donovan's posture remained poised. "Father, I'd like you to meet Charlotte." He placed a careful hand at the small of her back, the contact reassuring. "Charlotte, my father, Thomas Harrington." She mustered a courteous smile. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Harrington." Thomas offered a polite nod in return, though his eyes roamed her as if assessing potential flaws. "So you're the one who's captured my son's attention. I confess I've heard very little about you." He gestured for them to sit on a plush sofa, his expression unreadable. Charlotte's nerves jangled, but she recalled Donovan's advice. Act calm, respond naturally. They seated themselves side by side, Donovan's arm drifting over the sofa's back, subtly claiming her presence as something familiar. A hush settled while Thomas studied them. Eventually, one of the suited men coughed, as if prompting an explanation. Thomas cleared his throat. "Donovan, you've always been particular. And now you appear with a wife out of nowhere. We have business expansions at stake. alliances that hinge on stability. I need to ensure this marriage is no spontaneous whim. Don't you agree? Donovan's jaw tightened. It's not a whim, he answered evenly. Charlotte and I connected through a shared circumstance. We decided not to hold a large wedding for personal reasons, but it's legitimate. He glanced at Charlotte, a hint of warmth flickering in his eyes. She's my wife. Her chest clenched with conflicting emotions. She hated lying, but she dipped her head with a shy smile as if to confirm Donovan's statement. It all happened fast, she murmured, but we realized we didn't want to wait. It felt right. Thomas's gaze narrowed, lips pressed. I see. He snapped his fingers at a passing maid, who stepped forward with a tray of drinks. Shall we toast to your union, then? He handed each of them a glass. Charlotte accepted hers, knuckles white around the stem. She forced a polite, thank you. The older men, presumably board members, launched into conversation about Donovan's latest business moves, peppering them with questions about how marriage might shift his schedule or responsibilities. Charlotte felt out of depth whenever the men discussed high-stakes deals. Donovan deftly fielded their queries, occasionally referencing her as his partner in life. The easy confidence in his tone impressed even her. If she hadn't known the truth, she might have believed him wholeheartedly. Eventually, a servant announced dinner was served. They moved to a formal dining room with a long mahogany table dressed in silverware and glittering crystal. Charlotte found her seat beside Donovan, across from Thomas. The meal began with a delicate soup, progressing to multiple courses. Conversation meandered from corporate expansions to philanthropic events. Donovan politely deferred to Charlotte at times, asking for her opinions as if she had genuine input. It left her both flattered and self-conscious, given she'd never navigated such formal dinners. Halfway through the main course, Thomas leaned forward. So, Charlotte, how does a young woman like you handle Donovan's demanding world? Surely it's daunting. She swallowed a morsel of salmon. It can be, she admitted, keeping her voice steady. But I'm learning. He has a wonderful team at Harrington Holdings. And well, my background was never fancy, but it taught me resilience. We, complement each other, I guess. A ghost of a smile curved Donovan's mouth. She's braver than most execs I've met. Her heart fluttered at the subtle praise. Meanwhile, Thomas's brow arched. Bravery is admirable indeed. The older man said nothing else, but a contemplative gleam in his eye betrayed his ongoing suspicion. Was he convinced, or did he see cracks? When dinner concluded, Thomas rose, swirling the last of his whiskey. He studied them, posture imposing. I'm hosting a gala in 2 weeks for key investors. I expect you both to attend. The city's elite will want to meet my son's wife. The tone offered no room for debate. Donovan inclined his head. We'll be there. Thomas turned to Charlotte. I'll look forward to observing how well you represent the Harrington name. His voice dripped with subtle challenge. She forced a measured nod, mind racing with dread about a large public event. So many eyes, so many potential slip-ups. Minutes later, they took their leave. Donovan's father and the older men watched from the foyer as Donovan guided Charlotte outside. The chill of the evening air brushed her cheeks. She exhaled in relief once they were safely in Donovan's car, driving away from that mansion's lofty intimidation. In the darkness, with city lights flickering in the distance, Donovan's shoulders gradually relaxed. You handled that well, he murmured. She let out a dry laugh. I doubt your father's convinced. He's intense. A soft grunt of agreement. He's thorough, but I think you made a good impression. The key is surviving the gala. After that, we'll have shown the world, or at least his circle, that our marriage is genuine enough. Her gaze flicked to him. Won't it be suspicious if they realize how little I know about your background, or if I slip on some detail? He gave her a reassuring glance. We'll prepare. Jacob can brief you on the basics of my family history, plus the company, so you can handle small talk. A pause, then gently. I'm sorry to ask so much of you, especially since this arrangement wasn't your choice. She softened, hearing the regret in his tone. We both have reasons. Let's just get through it. Then my mother's bills will be sorted and you'll keep your company. She forced a faint smile. Win-win, right? He gave a tight nod, but the unspoken tension simmered. She sensed an undercurrent of something else in him, a guarded longing she couldn't yet decipher. Maybe it was the same ache she felt whenever she recalled that fleeting memory of a child in peril years ago. Though she couldn't place it, echoes of a heroic deed lingered in her mind. She never would have guessed the boy she saved might be right beside her now. They arrived home, quietly stepping into the house. The day's exhaustion weighed on them both. She headed to her room, feeling both closer to Donovan and more entangled. The contract marriage solution was working, apparently, but it also demanded an emotional toll. Constant vigilance, carefully curated smiles, a web of half-truths. As she closed her bedroom door, she pressed her palm against the solid wood. A pang of longing pulsed inside her. For once, it wasn't a longing for money or stability, but for honesty, an unguarded moment where she could truly trust Donovan and he could trust her in turn. The tension between them, a mix of growing affection and the pretense that bound them, threatened to unravel her carefully built defenses. She changed into pajamas, brushing off her swirling thoughts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, preparing for the gala, navigating more illusions at the office. For now, she told herself she could handle it. And if the occasional memory of a childhood rescue flickered in her mind, reminding her of the self she once was, she quickly buried it under the present demands. Curling into the plush bed, she wondered how long she could keep her heart safely locked away. Because each day by Donovan's side felt like a step closer to something dangerously real. And Charlotte's breath caught the moment she entered the mansion's living room that evening. A garment bag hung from a standing coat rack near the sofa, the label from a renowned designer glaringly obvious. She approached it with caution, already suspecting why it was there. Donovan stood by the fireplace, studying her carefully, his posture tense in the ambient glow. I had this brought over, he said, gesturing to the bag. For the gala next week. I hope it's okay. She clutched the strap of her handbag, fighting a jolt of conflicting emotions. You bought me a designer gown? The warmth in her voice barely masked her unease. She was used to the occasional new blouse from a discount shop, not something so extravagant. His gaze dropped. Jacob took your measurements discreetly. I wanted you to have something nice to wear, but if it makes you uncomfortable, she exhaled, stepping closer. I'm not ungrateful, it's just a bit much, all this wealth on something we're pretending. She hesitated, searching his eyes. Thank you, though. He nodded slowly, a flicker of relief and lingering guilt on his face. We're both under pressure. The gala is the biggest public event my father's hosted in years. A lot of eyes will be on us. I want to help you feel confident. She ran her fingers over the sleek garment bag, an unspoken swirl of gratitude and anxiety coursing through her. I guess I should try it on? He gave a small, tentative smile. Sure, upstairs if you like. She slipped away to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. Laying the bag on the bed, she unzipped it to reveal a flowing midnight blue gown, shimmering with subtle beading along the bodice. It was undeniably beautiful, something she'd never have chosen or afforded on her own. The thought of stepping into that world made her stomach tighten, but they'd sealed their fates with the contract. This was the path she'd chosen to save her mother. She couldn't help but try it on, curiosity overriding doubt. Slipping into the soft fabric, she turned to the mirror. The reflection caught her off guard. She looked regal, even if she barely recognized the woman staring back. In that reflection, she saw glimpses of the uncertain girl who once jumped into danger to save a boy from kidnappers. Now, she was the one being shielded by a man she was forced to trust. A soft knock startled her. Charlotte? Came Donovan's voice from the hallway. Is it okay if I see how it fits? She felt a flush creeping up her neck. This was new territory. He'd seen her in casual attire, even a borrowed corporate outfit, but not a formal gown. Taking a breath, she opened the door. His eyes swept over her in quiet awe. That's perfect, he murmured, voice low. You look stunning. Heat radiated across her cheeks. It's mostly the dress, not me. He shook his head, stepping inside. No, it's you, he said, sincerity layering each word. They stood a foot apart, the hush of the corridor wrapping around them. She cleared her throat, folding her arms self-consciously. If I'm wearing this, I guess I'll need to practice walking in heels so I don't embarrass you at the gala. You could never embarrass me, he replied softly, searching her gaze. A moment stretched, tension charged with an unspoken longing. She saw it in his eyes, a flicker of deeper emotion he tried so hard to conceal. Her heart stuttered, reminding her how easily she could tumble into this precarious sham relationship. Before the hush could grow too thick, she stepped back, smoothing the gown's skirt. "Thank you for this. I'll keep it safe until the gala." She slipped into the attached bathroom to change back, letting the moment pass. Her pulse thundered. She had to be careful. In the following days, Donovan took her aside for short training sessions. He taught her how to navigate the questions that important guests might ask: who introduced them, how long they dated, any shared hobbies. More lies to memorize. They rehearsed a plausible story. They met through a philanthropic event, connected over mutual concerns for community outreach, quickly realized they were meant to be, and quietly married to avoid media fuss. Sitting across from each other in his study, she recited her lines, crossing her ankles under the table. He corrected her gently whenever she forgot a detail or hesitated. The closeness of these sessions left her dizzy. They were forging an entire backstory together, sealed with the ring on her finger, the ring symbolizing a marriage that was half lie, half something else. One evening, after finalizing some details, Donovan paused, gazing at her from behind his desk. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I know we're weaving a web of stories. I hope it's not too overwhelming." She pursed her lips. "I'm fine. It's a lot to keep track of, but I'd rather be prepared than humiliate you in front of your father's circle." He gave a wry smile. "This world can be ruthless. You'd never humiliate me, though. Don't think like that." Then he stood, moving around the desk to stand at her side. "We might need to do a few practice rounds of, well, how we act physically. Dancing, maybe. Appearances can hinge on small gestures." Her stomach fluttered. "Dancing?" He looked almost shy, lowering his gaze. "Yes, for the gala's formal portion. Typically, couples share a dance. I don't want to blindside you. If you're comfortable, we can practice a few steps." She clenched her hands together. She recalled a long-ago dream of being twirled in a beautiful gown by someone who adored her. But that was a fairy tale, right? "This is a contract," she reminded herself. Yet she found herself nodding. "Sure, let's practice." They went to the large living room, pushing aside furniture for space. He tapped a quick command on his phone, soft classical music filling the room. He offered his hand, and she hesitantly placed hers in his. Another wave of that tremor coursed through her at the contact of his warm palm. He taught her a simple waltz pattern, guiding her steps. The hush in the mansion amplified the gentle melody. Each time he pulled her slightly closer, she felt her heartbeat hammer, an unspoken tension swirling around them. She tried focusing on the rhythm, but his gaze transfixed her. In the low lamplight, his features seemed softer, eyes reflecting a secret vulnerability. Their feet occasionally bumped. She murmured an apology. He laughed quietly, the sound genuine. "It's all right. We'll figure it out together." Minutes drifted into a calm, tender bubble. Two people dancing in the hush, connected by a contract marriage that was starting to feel heartbreakingly real. Charlotte's chest squeezed. She was meant to keep a safe emotional distance, but each glance up at his face, each reassuring press of his hand at her waist, eroded her guard bit by bit. When the music ended, they froze in place. His hand lingered in hers, both breathing a little unsteadily. For an instant, she thought he might lean in, bridging that last inch between them. Instead, he released her, stepping back with a faint, regretful smile. "That was good," he said, voice husky. "You're a natural." She swallowed, her cheeks warm. "Thanks." A fragile silence settled, loaded with all the words left unsaid. She finally mustered a light laugh, shaking off the moment. "Next time, maybe I won't step on your foot." He grinned, some tension lifting. "I'll hold you to that. We'll practice more if you're game. Now let's call it a night. Busy day tomorrow." They parted, each retreating to their separate rooms. Charlotte closed her door gently, leaning against the frame. Her pulse still fluttered from the dance, from how close they'd been, from the raw gentleness in Donovan's eyes. Slipping under the covers, she stared at the ceiling, mind alight with conflicting emotions. She tried to anchor herself in practicality. Everything they did was to fool his father, keep the company safe, pay her debts. Yet the memory of Donovan's gentle hold, the quiet conversation in the hush of the living room, kept her heart thrumming. If this was just an act, she wondered, why did it feel so alarmingly genuine? Exhaling, she rolled onto her side, letting the day's exhaustion pull her towards slumber. But a whisper of longing lodged in her thoughts, a silent fear that she was sliding deeper into a love she'd sworn to keep at bay. And in some secret corner of her mind, she recalled that half-lost memory of saving a little boy, never suspecting he might be the very man now cradling her heart in his hands. Charlotte slid her keys into the bowl by the door, letting the mansion's quiet hush envelop her. A full day of final gala preparations at Donovan's side had left her both exhausted and inwardly jittery. 2 nights remained until the event, and she was drowning in unspoken emotions, conflicting feelings that surfaced whenever Donovan's warm gaze lingered on her. She crossed into the main living area, pausing at the sight of a small pile of boxes near the corner. The housekeeper had mentioned earlier that Donovan was reorganizing some personal effects. Curious, she inched closer. Most boxes were taped shut, labeled with year ranges. One, however, sat partially open, the lid askew. Something about it tugged at her attention, perhaps the corner of an old photo album peeking out. Normally, she'd ignore private belongings. But a fleeting memory of Donovan rummaging for something in a study drawer came to mind. Maybe this was the continuation of that search. She hesitated, reasoning that she should respect his privacy. Then again, her eyes fell on a photograph that lay on top of the album, half exposed. She recognized Donovan's sharp gray eyes in the face of a child around 8 years old. The boy stood in a park, holding onto the arm of a security guard. Bruises marred his small forearms, and behind him, a swirl of concerned adults lingered. Another child hovered at the edge of the frame, a girl with messy pigtails, partly blurred as she turned away. It took Charlotte a second to process. A jolt of familiarity ripped through her. That face, that posture, the half-lost memory of a kidnapping attempt she'd witnessed long ago flooded her senses. Time seemed to slow. She sank to her knees beside the box, picking up the photo. Her heart hammered, each beat echoing with the realization the little boy in this photograph was Donovan. And the girl with pigtails, that was her. The setting, a park she vaguely recalled from childhood. The shadows of men who must have been kidnappers overshadowed in the background. Her gut twisted. All the half-remembered details she'd occasionally revisited in daydreams snapped into sharp focus. She heard footsteps behind her. Tearing her eyes from the picture, she turned to see Donovan at the threshold, expression tight with alarm. His glance flew to the photo in her hand, and a flicker of acceptance crossed his face, as if bracing for the inevitable. She rose slowly, still clutching the photograph. You're the boy," she whispered, voice wavering. "The one I saved from those men. You knew?" Her eyes burned with a tumult of anger and wonder. "All this time?" He stepped forward, raking a hand through his hair. "Charlotte, let me explain. You recognized me from the start? That day you barged into my mother's shop?" She could hardly breathe. Memories of the anxious child, her own trembling fear, that moment of odd bravery. "Why didn't you tell me?" Pain rippled across his features. "I wanted to. From the moment I found you, I wanted you to know. But I was afraid. Afraid you'd see it as some sort of ploy or think I was using you. And he swallowed hard. I've been searching for you for years, hiring investigators to track down the girl who saved me. You were gone without a trace. Then I discovered your situation with the debt, your mother's medical bills. I couldn't just stand by." Her thoughts whirled, recalling their very first encounter in the store. The fiancé lie he'd told, the contract marriage, the lavish help, every kindness he'd shown. She exhaled shakily. "So, this entire scheme of marriage, was it to repay me for that day? Or did you?" An unguarded tenderness shone in his eyes. "At first, I thought it was just a debt I owed. You rescued me from something terrifying. I'd never forget that moment. But then, as I watched you, who you'd become, how selfless you are, I realized it wasn't just about repayment. It was, I've loved you since we were children. I know that sounds crazy, but after that day, I always dreamed of finding you again." Tears pooled in her eyes, a tumult of hurt and strangely powerful relief. "You let me think you were just a random billionaire stepping in. Meanwhile, you recognized me all along? Does your father know? Do your staff?" He shook his head, voice raw. No one else. My father threatened me with losing the company if I didn't settle down soon. I saw it as a chance to also bring you into my life, officially, even if it started as a contract. I was terrified you'd reject me if you knew the truth, that maybe you'd resent being found, or you'd see me as manipulative, using your desperate situation. He paused, eyes glistening. I'm so sorry I lied by omission. She pressed a hand over her mouth, tears finally slipping free. Memories collided, the trembling boy, the kidnappers, her older self sinking into an unwanted marriage of convenience. Now learning that for him it was all anchored in a decades-long devotion. I don't know what to feel, she admitted, voice trembling. Donovan moved closer, his posture tentative, as though afraid she might bolt. Feel whatever you need. Anger, betrayal, I understand. All I ask is that you know my love for you is real. It's not pity or a half-baked scheme. I was an 8-year-old boy who was shown kindness by a stranger, and that memory changed me. When I finally found you, I vowed I'd do anything to protect you in return. Her heart clenched at the raw emotion in his voice. She wanted to lash out for the secrets, but also wanted to collapse into his arms, grateful that he cherished her so deeply. Sniffling, she turned away slightly, hugging the photograph. How can I trust that this marriage isn't just your guilt or romanticized nostalgia? He let out a shaky breath. Because every day, being with you has reaffirmed it's not just a childish crush. I respect your independence, your talent, your compassion. I can't imagine losing that again. A moment stretched, thick with the ache of revelations. Slowly, she glanced over her shoulder at him, tears drying on her cheeks. And the contract? We only married for your father's sake. He nodded, a hint of shame flickering. Yes, but that was me clinging to the only strategy I saw to keep you in my life. I regret not telling you everything from the start, but I was scared. His hand twitched, wanting to reach for hers. If you want out, I won't stop you. I'll still pay for your mother's care. You've done enough for me, twice now, in fact. Those final words pierced her chest. Twice, once as a child, once saving him from the humiliating meltdown with his father's ultimatum. She inhaled, trying to calm the chaos inside. Despite the shock, a fragile sense of relief took hold. I need time to process, she whispered. I'm angry you hid this, but also I'm grateful, and maybe a little stunned that everything is more complicated than I realized. Take all the time you need, Donovan said softly, eyes full of sincerity. Just know I won't force you into anything. Whatever you decide, I'll respect. She gently set the photograph on a nearby table, staring at its faded edges. The father in the background, Donovan's boyish face. Then she turned back to him. I'm not sure what I'll decide, but I won't walk away just yet. Because a part of me, I can't deny what we've built together, contract or not. Tension released in his posture, relief evident. He ventured a small step forward, arms lifting as if to embrace her, but he hesitated, letting her choose to close the distance. After a moment's wavering, she allowed him to pull her into a loose hug. She pressed her cheek to his shoulder, tears threatening again. The hush of the mansion felt comforting, wrapping them in a moment of truth finally bared. She silently remembered that day in the park, how she was drawn to help a terrified boy, never imagining it would lead here. Fate, it seemed, had woven their stories tighter than she ever dreamed. And now, though confusion and hurt lingered, an undeniable spark of hope flickered too. Because if Donovan's love was as genuine as he claimed, maybe, just maybe, the contract could transform into something real. And that, despite all her reservations, made her heart quiver with cautious longing. In Unor. The day of the gala dawned with a hush of anticipation. Sunlight streamed through tall windows in the mansion, gilding every surface with an almost surreal brightness. Over the past 24 hours, Charlotte had drifted in a swirl of emotion. She'd learned Donovan was the boy she'd once saved, that he'd harbored a hidden devotion all these years. Now, she was about to accompany him as his wife to a grand event that would decide both his corporate fate and the credibility of their marriage. Everything hinged on how they presented themselves tonight. She stood in her room, smoothing the midnight blue gown Donovan had gifted her. Despite the tension lingering in her heart, she couldn't deny that wearing this dress made her feel graceful, even confident. The memory of him confessing his long search for her still pulsed in her mind. a heady mixture of betrayal and sweetness. She wondered, could they truly bridge the gap between contract and genuine love? A soft knock drew her attention. Donovan stepped in, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. For a moment, he paused at the threshold, gaze raking over her. He swallowed, voice husky with admiration. "You look breathtaking." Her cheeks warmed. She managed a quiet, "Thank you," eyes drifting over his refined ensemble. If nothing else, they would certainly make an elegant pair at the gala. But beneath the polished exteriors, tension simmered, feelings unspoken, a swirl of uncertainty over what would happen after tonight. They rode in near silence to his father's lavish venue, an expansive reception hall decked in opulence. Donovan's father had spared no expense, inviting city elite, influential foreign investors, and philanthropic partners. As their car approached, cameramen and reporters lined the entry's red carpet path. Security ushered them out, flashes popping like miniature fireworks. Charlotte's breath caught at the sudden glare, but Donovan offered his arm, anchoring her. She looped her hand through it, heart thudding, and stepped onto the red carpet with him. A wave of questions bombarded them. Reporters asked about the marriage, about Donovan's next business expansions, about rumors of an upcoming philanthropic project. Donovan deftly sidestepped them with short, confident replies. Charlotte forced a smile, trying not to let her nerves show. They eventually made it past the media throng and into a grand foyer where chandeliers glittered overhead. Thomas Harrington greeted them near the entrance to the ballroom, flanked by a handful of high-profile board members. He surveyed his son and Charlotte with a critical eye, then inclined his head approvingly. "You two make quite an impression," he remarked. Donovan's shoulders eased marginally. "Father, everything looks wonderful. Are the investors arrived?" he asked, neatly shifting conversation to business. Thomas nodded, gesturing for them to mingle among the guests. They waded into a swirl of suits and gowns, each cluster of people engaged in lofty small talk about the economy, corporate directions, or the latest philanthropic craze. Charlotte clung to Donovan's side initially, uncertain how to insert herself. Sensing her hesitation, he gently introduced her to key figures: a shipping magnate, a tech entrepreneur, a foreign ambassador. She gave polite answers, referencing the rehearsed story of how she and Donovan met. Despite her lingering resentment of the lie, she carried it off with surprising poise. Donovan's arm at her waist provided a steady undercurrent of reassurance. Midway through the evening, the master of ceremonies announced a formal dance segment. Couples took to the dance floor beneath a glittering chandelier. Donovan turned to Charlotte, question in his eyes. She mustered a nod, letting him lead her into the waltz they'd practiced. The string quartet began, and soon they were gliding among the other couples, the hush of spectators swirling around them. She focused on the familiar steps, remembering how he'd held her in the living room. His hand pressed against the small of her back felt even more certain, yet still tinged with a gentle caution, as if making sure she had room to decide. Each time their eyes met, a frisson of awareness sparked. The crowd blurred, journalists snapping photos, curious onlookers murmuring about Donovan's new bride. All Charlotte saw was the man in front of her, the boy she'd rescued, the billionaire who'd rescued her in turn, and the lover he might yet become. When the waltz ended, polite applause filled the hall. They stepped off the dance floor, and Donovan's father was waiting, arms folded. "You two have captivated the crowd," he observed, though his tone hinted at deeper scrutiny. It's rare to see Donovan so attentive to a woman. Donovan released Charlotte's hand, meeting his father's gaze evenly. "You wanted me to settle down. Now you can see for yourself that we're building a genuine life together." A slight tremor ran through his voice. She sensed how desperately he needed Thomas's approval. Thomas studied Charlotte for a long moment. "Are you truly prepared for all that comes with being a Harrington? The press, the responsibilities, the philanthropic demands." She forced a serene smile, recalling Donovan's advice not to buckle under intimidation. "I realize it won't be simple, but if it means standing by Donovan, I'm ready." She paused, letting sincerity shine through. "He's worth it." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, softened Thomas' stern face. He gave a short nod. "Very well, then I expect we'll see you two handle the challenges that come. Remember, Donovan, a stable personal life is crucial to the Harrington legacy. Then, as if that sealed the matter, Thomas turned to greet another board member. Donovan let out a quiet breath of relief. His eyes found Charlotte's, gratitude shining there. "Thank you," he said softly. She managed a faint smile, heart pounding with the sense of a near victory. The father hadn't fully warmed, but it seemed they'd passed an important test. The marriage, at least for the moment, was deemed credible. The rest of the gala proceeded more smoothly. Donovan introduced Charlotte to a philanthropic committee, discussing expansions for a children's hospital wing. She chimed in, offering thoughtful suggestions. They parted each conversation with admiration from the crowd. Through it all, Donovan's hand lightly rested on hers or guided her by the elbow, sending jolts of warmth that reminded her how precariously she stood between contract and real emotion. Eventually, near midnight, the gala wound down. Their final handshake done, they slipped into the waiting car. Once inside, the hush of the back seat folded around them. Donovan slumped against the headrest, exhaling. "That went better than I dared hope." She brushed away a loose strand of hair, scanning his tired but contented face. "Yes," she agreed. "Your father seemed, well, not wholly convinced, but at least not planning to strip you of the company. So that's progress?" He let out a short chuckle. "Progress indeed." He shot her a sidelong glance, eyes soft. "And you were incredible tonight. Thank you for stepping up, for letting me rely on you." Something in her chest tightened. She recognized the deeper meaning behind his gratitude, the weight of their shared secret. "Anytime," she said, though it almost hurt to hear how genuine he sounded. She still recalled the heartbreak of realizing he'd known she was his childhood savior. Yet the ache had dulled, replaced by a cautious hope. Perhaps they were forging something real. They returned to the mansion, both fatigued from the social gauntlet. Before she could head upstairs, Donovan gently caught her by the arm in the foyer. The minimal staff had long since retired. Only moonlight illuminated the marble floors, silvering the edges of furniture and reflecting in Donovan's eyes. He hesitated, as if weighing his words. "I'd like to talk," he said quietly. "If you're not too exhausted. I want to know where we stand. After everything you found out." Her heart pounded. "Sure," she whispered. She followed him to the living room where he flicked on a single lamp. They sat on the sofa, perched at opposite ends, facing each other. He took a breath, meeting her gaze. "I used to think this entire plan, a contract, appearances, was my best move. Now I can't deny it's become personal." Gently, he reached for her hand, stopping short of actually touching her. "I meant every word about loving you since we were kids. But I understand if you can't forgive the lies, or if you still want out. If so, I'll set you free and continue paying your mother's bills. No strings." Her eyes stung with emotion. He was giving her an out, truly. No manipulations. "Donovan?" She swallowed, tears threatening. "I was so angry, but I've watched how you've cared for me, my mother, the store, everything, and I can't pretend my own feelings are unaffected." Her voice trembled. "I'm scared, but I think I love you too." Relief and something like joy swept across his features. He inched closer, finally cradling her hand in his. "Charlotte," he murmured, voice thick with emotion, "I promise, from now on, no more secrets. Let's make this marriage real if that's what you want." She fought a sob, breath hitching. "I do," she said, voice quivering. "But can we do it slowly? There's so much to rebuild." He nodded, reverence shining in his eyes. "We'll take it at your pace. I just want you by my side without the weight of a contract." He paused. "We can tear it up tomorrow. Publicly, we'll remain married, but in private, we'll choose each other for real. No illusions." A laugh escaped her, half tears, half relief. Who knew a business deal could lead to something so wonderful? He smiled, finally daring to lean in. "Fate, maybe," he whispered. She let him close the final gap, pressing his lips to hers in a gentle, lingering kiss. The hush of the mansion and the glow of that single lamp witnessed the moment two hearts met, freed from the shackles of pretense. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, both breathing shakily. "I owe you everything," he said, voice hushed. "You rescued me as a boy, and you're rescuing me now from a lonely future. I'll spend the rest of my life proving how much you mean to me." She sank against him, eyes brimming with tears of relief. "It's not rescuing, Donovan," she whispered. "It's love." They stayed there, entwined, until fatigue claimed them. Eventually, he guided her upstairs, each step filled with a luminous hope for what lay ahead. She entered her bedroom, turning at the threshold to see him watch her with a tender grin. "Good night," she breathed, heart buoyant. "Husband," he gave a mock bow. "Good night, wife." Then he retreated down the hall, the quiet laughter in his voice echoing her own euphoria. Slipping into bed, Charlotte felt an unprecedented sense of peace. The vow they'd once forced upon each other had shifted from a burdensome contract to a newfound promise of genuine devotion. She might still recall the heartbreak of deception, and there would be challenges, Thomas Harrington's demands, the public eye. But in the hush of that starry night, she realized she no longer feared the future. And because she wasn't alone, and neither was he. She closed her eyes, a soft smile lingering. Tomorrow, they'd face the world with open hearts, and for the first time, it wouldn't be a performance. It would be the start of a true partnership. Two souls bound by both fate and choice, free to love without shame or secrets. Charlotte stood on the back terrace of Donovan's mansion, the late morning sun warm against her face. Down below, neatly trimmed hedges and vibrant flowers formed a picturesque garden, one she was still getting used to admiring rather than merely passing through. It had been a week since they'd bared their hearts, forging a real bond instead of a contractual facade. Now she couldn't help but feel a tender anticipation with each dawn, a sense that life might be both simpler and more profound than the carefully scripted arrangement they began with. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Turning, she saw Donovan approach, wearing a light jacket over a casual shirt, less formal than his usual suit. That in itself was a testament to how things had changed. He'd promised to slow down, to reclaim pieces of himself lost in corporate pressures, especially now that their relationship no longer hinged on performance. Their father's looming threat had eased, replaced by acceptance, though not quite adoring paternal approval. Still, it was enough that Donovan retained control of the company and the freedom to choose his own path. "Good morning," he said softly, his gaze flicking to the vase of fresh lilies she'd placed on the terrace table. "You're up early." She smiled, heart fluttering. "Just wanted to enjoy the quiet, and I was thinking about my mother. She's at the clinic for a follow-up exam. Thanks again for arranging a driver to take her." He dipped his head. "She deserves comfort after all she's been through. I'm glad she's feeling better." A pause. "I was also hoping you'd come to the office around noon. We have a board check-in, but after that, I'm free for lunch. Maybe we can announce to your department that your role is changing?" She tilted her head, curious. "Changing how?" "More creative, if you like. Or something that suits your strengths," he offered, resting a hand gently over hers. "You've endured enough menial work. If we're being honest, I want you involved in something you actually enjoy. I realize we never fully discussed your own dreams, beyond the debts and family burdens." Her chest clenched. She recalled her neglected love for art, how she used to dream of painting full-time. "I'd like that," she whispered, a tender hush coloring her tone. "But let's go slowly. I don't want to waltz in and have employees resent me. After all, there was already jealousy." A wry smile tugged his lips. "We can handle that together. My staff will adapt. If they see your genuine passion, they'll come around." Stepping close, she let her fingers thread through his. The shift from forced polite distance to unguarded affection still gave her a thrill. "All right, Donovan," she murmured. "I trust you." He raised her knuckles to his lips in a gentle kiss, making her cheeks warm. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me." They drove to the office in the same car that afternoon, a symbolic departure from the old charade. Now they were a genuine couple with no reason to hide their arrival. The hush in the lobby was almost comical when staff recognized Mr. Harrington stepping out of the car with Charlotte at his side, both appearing comfortable and in sync. There were murmurs, but no longer the scathing curiosity. After the bullying incident was resolved, employees realized she must hold a significant place in Donovan's life. The board meeting itself was short, an update on new investments, philanthropic partnerships. Charlotte observed from a seat at the side, noticing how Donovan carried a more relaxed air than before. Even in official duties, he exuded a quiet confidence, no longer overshadowed by the fear of his father's interventions. Once they concluded, Donovan's father, Thomas, approached them privately. He regarded them with a thoughtful expression. "I've heard good things. Investors find you both quite compelling," he said. "Though I remain watchful, it seems your marriage is stable?" The question in his tone made Charlotte's heart skip, but Donovan met his father's eyes squarely. "It is. You don't have to worry about the company, Father," Donovan said calmly. "We're in a better place than ever, personally and professionally." Thomas gave a short nod, scanning Charlotte. "I see. Then I hope you'll stand beside him at the next philanthropic summit." A flicker of grudging respect crept into his voice. "I suppose I misjudged how quickly you two could bond." She sensed this was as close to an apology as the older man would offer. "I'll do my best to uphold the Harrington name, Mr. Harrington," she said, tempering her voice with respect, though a part of her remained cautious. He simply gave a clipped nod before striding off, leaving the faintest glimmer that maybe he was prepared to accept her. With that hurdle cleared, Donovan escorted Charlotte to an upstairs lounge. He'd arranged a small buffet lunch for just the two of them. Over plates of fresh salad and grilled chicken, they spoke candidly about her mother's improving health, about potential expansions at the store, and about the possibility of Charlotte stepping into a more creative role, maybe collaborating with the design department or heading a small philanthropic project for the arts, bridging her old artistic passion with the company's resources. "You'd still keep your official personal secretary title," he explained, "but I can carve out time for you to pursue art or community outreach. We can do more for struggling artists, sponsor galleries, that kind of thing." Her pulse stirred at the thought. "That's unbelievably generous," she said softly, emotions welling. "I never dreamed I'd get back to painting while ensuring my mother's well-being. It feels like everything's coming full circle." He set down his fork, reaching across the table to lace their fingers. "That's because it's no longer a contract, Charlotte. It's us, building a life. I want to see your dreams flourish, not just solve crises." Her lips curved in a tender smile, warmth spreading through her chest. For so long she'd fought to stand on her own, wary of pity or handouts. But with Donovan, it felt different, like real partnership. "I'd like that," she breathed. That evening, once they returned to the mansion, they settled into the living room, where a low fire crackled in the hearth. Donovan lounged on one end of the sofa, Charlotte at the other, an open album of old photos between them, the same album that had revealed their childhood link. Carefully, Donovan flipped the pages, pointing out bits of his youth. She saw glimpses of the luxurious but lonely world he'd inhabited. A young Donovan at polo matches, attending exclusive boarding schools, rarely smiling. At last, they reached the photograph from the kidnapping aftermath, the image that sparked their confrontation. Charlotte lightly traced the edges. "I still can't believe we were in each other's paths so early. Fate can be strange." He nodded, voice hushed. "After that day, I didn't see you again, but the memory kept me going whenever I felt alone. You were the proof that kindness exists outside my gilded cage. That's partly why I built so many philanthropic branches in the company, hoping maybe we'd cross paths if you'd ended up volunteering or benefiting from them." She gave a watery laugh. "You found me in the most roundabout way, huh?" Then her voice dropped. "I only wish you'd told me sooner." A shadow flickered over his expression. "I was afraid of overwhelming you. I thought if you knew from the start, you might feel pressured, like I was collecting a debt." She pressed a gentle hand over his. "I get it. I do. And though it hurt to discover it that way, I'm ready to leave that behind." She took a measured breath, eyes shining with a quiet acceptance. "We're here now, aren't we?" He exhaled, relief mingling with quiet joy. "Yes," he whispered, their gazes held, tension morphing into a soft, shared longing. Leaning in, he brushed a tender kiss across her lips, slow and reverent. She melted into it, letting the warmth of the moment chase away the ghosts of secrecy. Minutes drifted by as they sat entwined, talking about everything from her mother's next doctor visit to the new philanthropic idea bridging the arts community and his corporate might. Eventually, the conversation lulled, and they simply rested against each other in front of the fire's glow. The hush of the mansion felt less daunting now, a home rather than an echoing palace. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. Donovan, she said softly, I know we started this with a contract, but do you think we should make an official vow renewal? Something that's truly ours, not for show? Emotion flickered across his face, a smile curving his lips. I'd love that. A small ceremony, just close friends, your mother, maybe even my father if he can behave. He squeezed her hand. This time, the vows are real, no illusions. I want to stand before you with an honest heart. Her throat tightened with emotion, and she nodded, tears edging her lashes. Then let's do it. He gathered her in his arms, burying his face in her hair as the fire crackled. They were no longer bound by a hollow contract, but by gratitude, devotion, and the awareness that they'd saved each other across time, once physically in that park, now emotionally in this new shared life. The future felt bright, brimming with a mutual promise that love, however unexpected, could grow from the unlikeliest of origins. And as the flames flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls, Charlotte closed her eyes in contentment. For once, the path ahead felt open and warm, shaped not by desperation or secrets, but by two hearts forging a genuine marriage, free to love without bounds.